Hey friends, it's Jen, and I'm so glad you're here. Before we get into my conversation with Justin Cauthen, I want to say thanks for even clicking on this podcast and joining a conversation like this one, where I honestly sought out someone who is of a very different experience from me, in that Justin Cauthen served in our military for 20 years. He just retired. And I mean, he's had 5 tours of combat duty. He has led troops in the Far East, in Southwest Asia. He was a flight medic by trade, and then rose in the ranks of the military, became an advisor to the ministries of health in the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. I mean, the logistics command of the Afghan army. There's so much experience this man has had and endured. And we talk a lot about PTSD. We talk about military service. We talk about suicide. We talk about what spouses and kids of service members experience. And in all of it, one of the key things Justin speaks on is the importance of assuming noble intent in another person, and recognizing that everybody's just doing the best they can with the resources they've been handed, and the situation they find themselves in. The vast majority of people are just doing the best they can. And so we really got into a number of topics. I mean, I asked him questions like, gosh, what do you do when your commander in chief or your authority figure or your commanding officer gives an order that you, in your soul, like your integrity, it feels wrong, or it feels out of alignment, or you have questions about, or you don't feel right about? How do you navigate something like that? We talked about so many different things. I mean, he even is such an advocate, really, for the stigma that sometimes military officers or military service people experience, but even right down to extrapolated it to nurses, to EMTs, to first responders. And he is such a champion for all of the above, all of those people and more. And I just love that about him. And so we're going to dig into it. And I'm really happy you're here and willing to click in and listen to two people who come from a very different place in life. And yet we just have such a beautiful, respectful conversation where their defenses are down. There is nothing but safety in a conversation like this, where you can ask hard questions and somebody can be vulnerable. And, Justin got really vulnerable with a number of things because he trusted me, and I was willing to ask and give him the room to answer or not answer. And it was a great experience. So I love that you're here. May you benefit as much as I did. I think my biggest takeaway was his phrase, trauma radiates. And he talked about trauma people experience, but how it can radiate out into family members and community, et cetera, and how we can look at that with fresh eyes and really move forward in beautiful, beautiful ways. So I've got a lot I'm taking away from this conversation, and I know you're going to feel the same exact way. So join Justin Cauthen and I in this next conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to Listen for Real. It's me, Jen Oliver. Oh, y'all, I'm here with Justin Cauthen, and he is new in my world, but this is the epitome of getting out of my echo chamber. And what I mean by that, for those who are new to this podcast, including you, Justin, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Is the antidote to the echo chamber is me having spent most of my life in this very narrow, myopic viewpoint, which can only be informed by so much, right? If you look at it, here I am, this white, middle-aged, cisgendered, heteronormative lifestyle living, more conservative underpinnings, more Christian, Judeo-Christian influences. Those were my underpinnings. And that created, especially if you take my socioeconomic status, my education level, I'm American born, my perspective on the world is really quite narrow. And that no longer sat well with me. A few years ago, I went, no, There's so much more here in these gorgeous souls with these different worldviews and lived experiences that I want to know more deeply, so that I have the pleasure of being in relationship with new people. B, I want to broaden my perspective and love my neighbor a little more readily because I know my neighbor more deeply, and have gotten out of my judgments and my putting people in their little prescribed boxes because I think they're a certain way, because they identify a certain way, or they hold a certain role, or they do a certain job. So Justin could not be in a lot of ways more opposite of me, as a man who's spent his life career serving our country in the military. He's dealt with war, he's dealt with violence, he's dealt with pain, he's dealt with love. He is this complex, amazing soul, and has faced a lot of things I haven't. So for me, who honestly, I have enjoyed incredible safety. I have endured only so much comparatively. And again, we don't put grief and pain and trauma on a hierarchy. That's not what I'm looking to do here. But I just recognize I have been privileged and have experienced very little as it relates to some of the traumas that many people do experience. I have made judgments before around the military and perhaps things we hear in sound bites on news sources. And then it paints a picture of a service person, oftentimes not positively, if you look at certain things that have occurred in our history. And or, there's also these beautiful pictures that people paint. And I just want beyond the soundbite, I want relationship with people. And Justin was the perfect person to say, hey, can we come on and just talk about really earthy stuff? And my audience is kind of my mindset where they want to, we may not be, no, this is a better way to put it, Justin. We may not always be like-minded because we come from a different viewpoint and perspective and informed wisdom, but we are like-hearted. That's what I know about us. And that's all we need, right? That's all we need to have unity, to have connection, to have a beautiful relationship, and to have deeper understanding of one another. And so it's an honor to have you here, for you to open up, especially now that you are retired. And that's a whole new ball game for you. So first of all, thank you. I'm so glad you're here. And if we were in my house, you'd be in my living room. We'd be sitting here having a cup of tea and talking very, very frankly. And that's what I would love for you to do, because everyone else is kind of joining us here in that living room on the couch, as I always say. And I would just love for you to tell them, like we do when we go out to dinner, who you are, what you value in the world, what you're about. And then I want to dig in, and honestly, with some really strong questions, because I know you're here for it and you don't shy away from anything. And I think your perspective is going to really be a gift to a lot of people who may be wrestling with different things or just want a fresh paradigm shift. So with that, tell everyone who you are and what you want us to know. Let's start there.
First of all, Jen, what you said about the opening of mindsets, on behalf of all veterans, thank you so much. That means a lot that you said that. That's something that us veterans aspire to do as well, and sometimes fall short of as well. And I think it's so beautiful that you are assuming the best in all of humanity, specifically in this case, United States military veterans, and that means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah.
On that note, my name is Justin Cauthen. I recently retired from the United States military as of about 3 weeks ago. Fully retired, now a civilian, now Mr. Cauthen. I enlisted in the Army in 2004. At 17 years old, inspired by the ongoings of the United States at the time and the stresses that she was under. I was in high school when I saw the towers fell, and my generation was affected by all of that. It was a very patriotic time, and we can talk about this later, Jen, but the entire culture of America was centered around the the militarization and the appreciation of the modern warfighter.
Yeah.
And then I've served in a number of positions in the military. I was very lucky to join the military. Actually, I graduated high school with a 1.74 GPA. I didn't know I had ADHD at the time. I wasn't thriving in a traditional scholastic environment, but the military was exactly what a young, adventuresome, and very spiritually grounded person needed and wanted to be. I had the honor of serving as a medic and then later as a flight medic for the United States military. And I've served in positions all the way from being a medic in an infantry platoon of 30 guys, all the way up to being a sergeant major, part of a hospital. And the civilian term would be an executive clinical director here in Colorado Springs. I've had a chance to advise other militaries. I've had a chance to serve foreign governments and advise them on how to do things of healthcare and how to protect their people from disease, and how to train their soldiers to survive.
Yeah.
I've also had the ability to be married to the same woman for 17 years, and she's dealt with 5 different tours of combat, while herself not being an American and learning a very direct American experience at the same time. And we have one son who's about to turn 16 here in a few days who seeks to join the military as well. And so we've lived our entire lives and we've grown up in this echo chamber, as you said.
Yeah.
And I hope to talk more about that too, and the culture and the isolation of the culture that I grew up in. But yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Well, let's start first with probably, can you help me understand? Well, let me paint the picture. You and I had an experience when I was in Colorado Springs,
Yeah.
and I really felt it was so valuable. And here's why. We were at a TEDx together, and you guys know when you're in a conference or you're in a place where there's microphones and there's speakers, and then suddenly there's like this boom that is so loud and startling, and a microphone, or there's feedback, but it's so loud and it startles everybody in the room, right? And we all just jumped. But our instinct immediately, because we were sitting next to you, Justin, Daniel, your son, literally put his body practically on you. I grabbed your thigh, and you were like, I watched you just look down. You took a major breath, and you had composure. But I was like, wow, his fight or flight response, everything is just full tilt right now. But what that reminded me of is the importance of, first of all, understanding that, because if you don't know what that feels like, then it's really hard to understand. And then you might observe somebody else respond to something or react in a way that is hard to grasp. But I think it's emblematic of a bigger picture, which is, you said 5 tours of combat duty. Can we just start there with what are moments like that little microcosm like to the 5 tours of duty, and how have you learned to put those in their proper place in your life, because they've had profound impact on you? How
Well,
have you put those in their proper place? Yeah,
yeah.
and how do you navigate it? Because there's people listening right now who have their own journey of whether it's PTSD, whether it is fears, whether it's reactions they can't control. Like, I just want to honor that the other people experience this, and it's not something I fully understand or speak to, and I want to understand it better. So to that end,
You're going right into the emotional heartstrings
I'm going
questions,
right
aren't you?
in. I mean, I'm just going right in
Yeah.
because there's so much we can unpack. And I saw your humanity even more deeply that day. And I feel like that's such a gift when you see someone else's humanity, which is not the humanity you would have necessarily wanted me to see.
Right. And on that, I'd like to start there because I think 2 things that are important to capture is my 15-year-old literally putting his body over mine. That's not a typical thing that a teenager should do, right?
Right.
And then the other part, when you and your when your counterpart, like as I was very apologetic and I felt like potentially I was being a kind of an attention hog, and I was embarrassed that maybe people thought that that was a non-earnest thing that I was doing, because it's a little embarrassing.
Mm,
Um, Something that your counterpart said is that this is your body protecting yourself.
yeah.
The trauma specifically is not something that is monopolized by the United States military. And I'd argue that every civilian has a lot more in common with military and the traditional PTSD moments that have been kind of shown in Hollywood and shown things like that than you realize. We just have a much more visual way of displaying those protection measures. On
Mm,
that note, I know we've probably all seen at least one war movie. And earlier, a producer was talking about, he mentioned Vietnam and World War II specifically. And I said it was very interesting that he talked about those two wars because they couldn't be more different.
mm,
Vietnam has far more in common with the global war on terror, the war that I was a part of, um, than it does of World War II. The lack of uniforms in fighting an enemy in what we call a low intensity conflict or a counterinsurgency is a far different thing traumatically for the individual. And the reason for that is we're called into an area to improve an environment. That could be from a government and economic standpoint, an idealistic standpoint, a myriad of ways. But the majority of the people that we are having to that are committing violence against us are those same people living in that community. Maybe
yeah.
not traditionally live in that community, but there is that. There's many times when we would have to engage the local populations,
Yeah.
and we knew that there's a good chance that these are the same people that are going to try and inflict violence upon me and my fellow men and women in uniform, right? So it is so incredibly challenging to maintain your humanity and your love and your caring for your fellow man and woman in that moment, right? When you're trying to do good for someone and improve a place that you believe in, or improve it coming from a place emotionally that you believe in,
Yeah.
while they know that, well, you know that they idealistically may hate you. I
Yeah.
think the key thing there in that, if I may kind of go on a tangent though, is
Yeah.
striving. I think the most human thing and the most loving thing, and maybe even the most American thing you can do, is striving to understand and empathize with those that despise you. It's a term we use in one of the units I was in called assume noble intent. It's a thing I'm very passionate about.
I want to repeat that. Assume noble intent. So you're
Yes, ma'am.
assuming noble intent on the part of the other person. Okay, go
And
ahead.
the definition that I use for it is the intentional acknowledgement that everyone is far more alike than we realize, despite the self defenses that we have in our brain to the contrary.
Mm,
What I mean by that, you alluded to this about maybe some of the stereotypes that we have in the military. I'm here to argue that no one has ever had a problem with the United States military just because something happened there.
yeah.
Maybe you saw one of us behave unprofessionally. Maybe you had a family member that was in the military and was a bad person and did something to you personally or to your family.
Right.
Maybe you've seen something on television that you just couldn't understand. And our lizard brains, our self defense brains, believe that we as individuals are generally good, generally doing the best that we can, and generally well meaning. And
Mm,
if we witness something that is the opposite of that, we have to default to, well, if I'm generally good, generally doing the best we can, and generally well meaning, the other person must be generally bad, generally doing the worst they can, and generally having ill intent.
mm-hmm.
And this is where we could start looking at the enemy as the enemy. And suddenly we dehumanize them to justify our emotions of hate, confusion, self defense, and all those things.
Yeah.
It's where racism comes from. It's where sexism comes from. It's where xenophobia comes. I'm sorry, religious phobias come
Yeah.
from, because you saw some stimuli and you had to justify it in some way. But if we just assumed noble intent, that
Yeah.
Jin feels this way for a reason. I may never know it because I'll never be able to communicate with her like that because one of the two parties has established a level of distrust or malice towards the other. But if we can know and believe in our hearts that we would only feel that way if something bad happened to us or we witnessed something bad,
Yeah.
the other person would be the exact same way. I think if we all kind of,
Wow.
yeah,
It's a great equalizer what you're saying here in a lot of
yeah,
ways.
yeah, and we all have an enemy or someone that we have demonized in our own lives, someone
Mhm.
that we consider to be the worst humans possible. It
Mhm.
could be, in my case, an enemy that I had to meet on the battlefield. It could be my ex-wife. It could be my stepsister. It could be my brother. It could be my child. It could be someone who cut me off in Starbucks.
Mhm.
But the truth is that we were very unwarranted in our feelings because again we defaulted to something that we had to justify to make ourselves feel better. But if we
Mhm.
said, well, maybe my ex felt the way they did because of something I said at one point in time for a trauma in their life that I was never going to be able to understand.
Yeah.
Maybe my son stopped speaking to me because of not that they are a bad person, but because I led in a way that hurt them and I didn't realize the way that they were growing up in high school and I didn't bother seeing that. And I'm not
Mhm.
saying recenter the blame on yourself. I'm saying understand that we are all children of trauma.
Mhm.
And on that note, that's really kind of the zeitgeist of what we see in the military, right? I'm well aware there's so many stereotypes of soldiers just being these people that are turning to substances because they are angry about the things they did in the war. But the truth
Mhm.
is that the military is not a very humane experience. No matter how you served, if you served for a few months and then got injured and couldn't finish
Mhm.
training, to someone that spent 30 years into someone who lost a limb in combat,
Mhm.
our brains, especially our 21st century brains, aren't designed to thrive and enjoy in a holistic sense that experience. It's not normal to jump out of an airplane. It's not normal to hear loud sounds. And it's not normal to engage in violence against a complete stranger. And there's so many things in between. It's not
Wow.
yeah, it's not normal to have to speak in a boisterous, demeaning tone to your fellow man or woman, but sometimes that's what the military requires due to the urgency of things that we do. And
Right.
all these little things create imprints on us. All these little things create fingerprints on us.
Yeah.
And going back to specifically the war on terror, it was a truly polarizing experience because from 2001 to especially 2011, the military was so strong in the American identity between, I
Mhm.
mean, video games, music, movies. If a business didn't give a military discount, that hurt their business, right?
Mhm.
Everyone flew American flags, and for good reason, especially immediately after 2001. But for people who are going through a low intensity or counterinsurgency conflict and dealing with the confusions and navigating all the different obstacles of that, and then to be exposed to the hero worship back home, that can really cause confusion. In
Mhm.
2008, I was coming home from Iraq and getting ready to see Daniel, our child, born. It had been a rough first few months for a number of reasons. Not so much the combat, but more for just the interactions of people having. And at that point, with 1 year deployed, 1 year home, 1 year deployed, 1 year back home, that really causes a lot of problems. We had a very high suicide rate in our battalion, and we had a divorce rate of close to 60% in that single year.
Oof.
And me and my own wife were feeling the strain ourselves. The fact that she's navigated this whole career with me, I'm so thankful for. We
Yeah.
could do a whole video on how much I appreciate the spouses of service
Yeah.
members as well.
Yeah.
But we arrive in Dallas and we land in Dallas, and there they bring in a high school marching band, they bring in cheerleaders. Starbucks is completely free. there's police officers clearing out stores in the terminal so that we can buy things. That type of treatment coming from the way we were treated just a few like day ago, while in combat, is
Yeah.
so confusing and polarizing for the psyche, and that's something that people who lived and worked in that environment and in that culture are still coming down from. Not just
Whoa.
from the sorry,
Help me understand.
yeah,
Wait a minute. Is this a little bit like, you know what you're reminding me of? Remember the movie, I think it's the one with Tom Hanks where his plane crashed and he's on the island all by himself?
yeah, Castaway, love it.
Castaway. Okay.
Yeah,
And remember when he gets back and he's rescued and they put him on the ship and there's piles of food,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
and marching bands and
yeah,
literally a beautiful hotel room with
mhm,
a beautiful bed, and he's like, he can barely eat it.
yeah,
He just lays on the floor.
yeah,
And okay, so is it because, so what you're describing, everyone means well, they're going, oh my gosh, our heroes are back.
mhm,
You're in Dallas. All of Dallas is like, yay,
yeah,
doing everything for you. But it's like your psyche has to catch up.
mhm, yeah, absolutely.
There's,
Yeah,
wow. Cause
and then
yeah,
you have people who are trusted with great responsibility, flying these amazing machines, operating these incredibly complex systems, being trusted with literally hundreds of millions of dollars. And then
totally.
they come home, and the spouse has been holding down the home for 12 months. For us, it feels like America's been on pause, but there's so
Mm,
much you've missed. The trash is being thrown at you to go take out the trash again. The baby's being handed back to you so the spouse can take a break. These
yeah.
are such emotionally bipolar or polarizing experiences. And it doesn't just end on deployments. The transitioning soldier is actually, I would say, the one who my heart really goes out to, especially now. Um I have PTSD, like a number of like every person in the military has PTSD.
Yeah.
Just like I would believe that every American has a has some strain of PTSD as well. Unfortunately, it's much more in your face, right? And I think
Mm,
Hollywood may have had a lot to do with that. On that note, though, rewind again back in those first 10 years in the military. The military is simply a microcosm of American society. And we were at that time just beginning to go through our great awakening of what mental health looks like.
yeah.
We were just then destigmatizing things like ADHD, much less things like bipolar and multiple personality or disorder, and all those other things that we're finding that are more and more common in the American mind. At that time in the military, if you saw mental health, not only were you looked upon as being weak, in some cases it was actually viewed as a betrayal because we believed that you would get kicked out of the military and that'd be one less soldier to go back to combat, and that would be one more gap in the line, as it were,
That's right.
and that you were just taking a break, and we've all had a hard time. But now we have military leaders who, on their military social media pages, show when they are going to a behavioral health treatment to help destigmatize that. And first of all, that's incredibly brave that they do that. And if you are
Yes.
a military leader listening to this, please continue to do that. That is more of a catharsis to the American warfighter than you will ever know. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um, and what America can do is just acknowledge that people leave the military with trauma. We're
Mhm.
not going to do these incredibly violent things that you see in the news. We latch onto this one issue every few years that happens, and
Mhm.
think this is the entire military. But over
Yeah.
3 million Americans have served in the global war on terror, and about 1.5 million Americans are in the military at any given time. That's a
Yeah.
lot of trauma per capita. And if
Yeah.
we acknowledge that this is just part of service, I think this won't just benefit the United States military. I think we owe this mindset change to police,
Yep.
firefighters, paramedics, and frontline responders in hospitals as well. I'm a big fan of the American nurse and the mid-level provider and what they did during COVID. And I think we're going to continue to see similar challenges that the American soldier felt for many years post-COVID, for kind of what they had to deal with and expose themselves to. So this is not a exclusively military thing. We've just done such a good job of kind of as we lift them up, as we lift military members up and show and celebrate them, we also put their challenges in a spotlight too, and that
Mm-hmm.
can have a negative effect without realizing it.
Well, it's really easy to forget that these are humans in the military.
Yeah, yeah,
There are humans in medicine. There are humans in platforms right now, billionaires who own companies.
mhm,
There are bad actors in other governments. I mean, humans are humans, and
yeah,
you have some who behave with ill intent,
mhm,
and you have some who are behaving in
absolutely,
ways that are high integrity. That's
mhm,
just human beings.
yeah,
But to go to so then when we see somebody behave in a way that we go, oh, that sullies the uniform, or that
yeah,
sullies this situation, or that just made teachers look bad, or whatever it is,
right,
we've got to remember, no, in every population, in
mhm.
every demographic, and in every job, there's going to be people who behave badly.
Yeah, and to do that, Jen, it would be like saying if a fellow podcaster got a
Yeah,
DUI,
yeah,
suddenly I'm now thinking that you, Jen, you're clearly drinking right now. That's
right
not
now,
fair
right,
or right. We wouldn't
right,
want that wished upon us, and we wouldn't want that wished upon us. And that's not a military thing. That's an American thing.
right. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
no, please
Yeah,
keep going.
I think that's where the polarization of politics and ideology in the United States comes from right now, is because we're not all doing what you're doing, Jen, seeking to broaden our horizons. We can do that without betraying our own ideals.
Yeah,
But as we seek to understand other people, we take away the demonization of the other side of whatever we're talking about and
yeah,
realize that these are just humans that are products of their experiences. The
yeah,
truth is, you talk about echo chambers.
yeah.
Jen, I use this. I use this analogy a lot, and usually I have an army hat on. I can take off for this, but I use an analogy of Miss Jen. If you were born in a hat, and you lived in that hat, and you grew up in that hat, you went to school in that hat, you got married in that hat, and you had grandkids and great grandkids in that hat. Your universe would of course be what?
In that hat.
The hat, right?
Yeah,
Even if a giant head of Justin leaned over that hat and explained how we have these cool moving screens that tell stories and these boxes that we can get in that take us to all different places across the world, and we can control our temperature and things like that, you couldn't believe that unless you went through a very intentional process of seeing the other side. And
yeah,
experiences are the one universal educator that we still haven't been able to find a way to outlearn.
yeah. Okay, I want to ask a question, but we're going to go to a break real
Okay.
quick. But here's what I want to come back to
Yeah.
if you're open to this. How does one reconcile
Mm,
when you have been, let's say, given an order
mm,
that in the military sense, so I'm going to ask military, but this can extrapolate to all of life,
mm,
that your integrity, your soul doesn't sit
mm,
right with,
mm,
but you are also, there's a reason, there's chain of command, and there's certain
mm.
aspects to military that we don't get to decide that. If a commander in chief or
Yeah.
if an authority figure says this, it is simply what you do.
Mm,
And then there's other times where somebody might go, yeah, but that doesn't sit right with like my soul, my integrity, my belief system,
mm,
etc. I find that because I look at that from not just the military, but I know you can speak to it,
mm.
but in life and
Yeah.
in general, I just want to I want to push into that a little bit because
Yeah.
I find that really hard to understand.
Mm,
And so I have a feeling you're going to be able to illuminate on that.
mm.
I'm even having a hard time getting the words out
Yeah.
because I'm really struggling with it and feeling like, ooh, it's even like a weird thing to ask and put someone
It's a
in a really
scary
hard
concept,
spot
right?
to even
Yeah.
ask it. So
Yeah.
I feel like a level of discomfort
Mm,
even asking it. So you get the dignity of your response,
yeah.
but let's just think on that. And then y'all, we'll come back on the other side of this break. We will be right here. We can't wait to join you back on this couch because I know there's probably a lot of things you guys are all thinking right now as you're listening. And I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
appreciate that you are just thinking
Mhm.
ideas, questions, things you want to debate, things you disagree with are
Yeah.
coming up right now as you're listening to us. And I love that. Like,
Mm.
that's where there's room for this. And to me, room in really good, meaty conversations for all of those explorations. So we'll be right back. And we are back. Okay, so I asked you this question and I was like struggling to find the words. And it's, of course, led to some other questions that I want to get back to. But first, how do you, so let's just talk about Justin, the man, and maybe this helps explain other people. How does one person obey an order
Mm.
that perhaps doesn't sit right with your soul or with your integrity or sensibility? Right now, we're in a time, and again, this is not speaking to any political situation, but I was just picturing, and this was the question I had. Very recently, many planes left the United States to deport upon the commander-in-chief's orders to deport, I believe it was Venezuelans, to a prison in South America.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking, like, ooh, was that a situation, whether you know about that situation or agree with it, it is totally not what I'm talking about right now.
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking the people who had to do the jobs of rounding up those people and putting them on planes and sending them off, I wonder if any of them disagreed. I wonder if any of them didn't want to do it. I wonder if any of them were voicing outrage, or were they like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? How does and that came to mind when I heard that news story for the first time. And with no judgment, I'm really trying to not have judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That's a rock and a hard place, I
Yeah.
got to believe, for the person who has been given an order, but it's brushing up against their very sensibilities. And when do you trust your own integrity and sensibility and not betray it? But when
Yeah.
do you also go, I follow an order because I took an oath to do so?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you navigate that?
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I think the fact that it's an awkward, uncomfortable question for you shows a lot at how much it is a topic and something that weighs on the minds of American men and women in uniform. I will say that that is one of thousands of examples. Even outside of combat, when Don't Ask, Don't Tell got repealed back in 2010, at the time, that led to a lot of rage with some people in the military because they joined the military under the guise of a certain um, belief system, right? And they felt like a new belief system was being forced upon them. When we started allowing transgenders in the military, same thing. When we started allowing same-sex couples to be married and receive medical benefits like a heterosexual couple would, also created those things. For me personally, a very challenging thing was I was a first sergeant, which meant paired with an officer, I led a unit of about 120 people with about 15 helicopters, and the funnest job of my career. But this was during COVID. And this is when the immunization came out, and I had to give direct orders to people to get this immunization or face being kicked out of the military. And there was a lot of people that had very strong beliefs about it. Some were religious beliefs that had been for a long time. Others were more recent concerns. Others just didn't want to be told what to do in this way, and they had a chance to finally say no to something. And it was so hard for me to enforce that because whether I believed in the vaccine or not, there's families on the line. There is kids and parents who relied on the United States military for their economic and healthcare welfare. There's lots of families that join the military because the healthcare is second to none, and they have children that are immunocompromised, spouses that have a history of very complex medical histories, right? And you know that now they are making a decision that they are potentially putting that in danger, right? And while it is their decision to make, your heart breaks that you have to be the one to enforce that and toe that line. But the truth is that the loyalty to the orders that are given to us by our elected leaders, and the classic saying of defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic.
Yeah.
The the constancy at which we follow orders does such wonders, unspoken things to you, the citizen of the United States. Ask yourself this. If the
Okay.
United States military just stopped being tomorrow, how would that affect the decisions that you make? How would that
Yeah.
affect your investments in your retirement? How would that affect where you send your children to school, or if you even let them out of the home? How would that affect how you vacation, how you make decisions on how much gas to put in your car? Not
Yeah.
just at a socioeconomic level, but at an individual level. What comforts would you lose if there wasn't the consistency of the military, knowing that we will follow the orders of the elected officials presiding over this country? No matter what political party is in
Yeah.
office at the time, there
Yeah.
is one thing you can always count on, is that we will follow the orders of those appointed over us. And I think
Wow.
that is something that it's actually not that alien from corporations as well. Uh,
Ooh, yeah.
the private sector requires people to have a level of loyalty and duty to that organization, to probably less of a degree in some cases, but it's still there. That is how America runs, is from a sense of comfort that certain things won't change. After the
Mm.
Civil War, it took no less than 27 years for socioeconomics to come back to a reasonable level of consistency. That is the impact on our psyches that a divorce from that loyalty can have. So, have I been faced with decisions that could potentially compromise my morals? Yes.
Mhm.
But the truth is, I don't believe I've ever truly compromised my morals on any significant regards, because the truth is that I'm still trying to make the best decisions within the scope of my power, to the
Mhm.
benefit of my soldiers, the benefit of my family, and the benefit of myself.
Mhm.
Now that I'm a civilian, I have to look in the mirror, and there's decisions I absolutely wish I had made better every day. There's
Mm.
soldiers that I didn't take good enough care of. There's opportunities that I wish that I should have taken. I still wish I'd gone to ranger school. But I can honestly say that I've never been so morally compromised that I can't see myself in the mirror. Um,
Mm.
there are hills that everyone should die on. But I'd like to say that the vast majority of military rarely get faced with those decisions, especially now in a time of relative peace.
Mm.
Perhaps in combat, and definitely in combat, there are challenges, but there are some things that you, at your individual level, cannot change. The only thing that you can do is put the most moral face on that decision.
Hey,
There's,
can I ask you a question though
yes,
on
ma'am.
that? You know how the rate of death by suicide is so high,
Mm,
as you referenced earlier? And I made the assumption that that rate is high because somebody did something that
mhm,
went against their moral fiber
mhm,
or integrity, what we're talking about, and they couldn't live with themselves.
mhm,
And
mhm,
again, that's me,
mhm.
civilian, in my
Yeah.
ignorance,
Mhm.
making a broad generalization.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
can you speak to that? Like,
Yeah.
what do you believe, having been there and
Yeah.
borne witness
Mhm,
to many of your soldiers, even, and people you love and
mhm,
care about, choosing to take their own life?
mhm.
Because that's a very sensitive subject, and I treat it with real care because I have such compassion
Yeah.
and zero judgment.
Mhm,
A lot of people judge when someone takes their life,
mhm,
and I don't,
mhm.
because the excruciating pain, I can really
Yeah.
understand how
Mhm,
that came to happen for them, and that decision came to be made. But
mhm.
how do you so I made the assumption that might be part of the big reason why
Yeah.
those numbers are so high.
Yeah.
Is it, so what do you say to that? Help me
So,
understand.
first of all, thank you, and I appreciate your delicacy and compassion when you ask that. I've lost 57 friends in the United States military due to this,
Oh,
personally. And I know, and I can probably think of close to 200 attempts, not ideations, actual attempts that have
yeah,
been foiled in some way or another. Thank goodness.
yeah.
Um, in my experience, and my experiences are my own, I don't speak for the United States military. Um, Almost all of those exclusively were based on stressors that happened to them, not things that they did or things that they did to others. I find that extreme guilt of that level, at least for military, for the most part, actually wakes people up to action to change and fix things. I have
Oh,
found that anytime that I felt that I did something wrong or I wronged my fellow soldier, my training and my creed and my oath to the United States military and to the citizens of the United States actually kicked in. And this is this is a credit to the military training and the culture in the military to improve things. We always say improve your foxhole, always improve your fighting position, always
yeah,
make things better around yourself.
yeah,
Um, and it's always been, at least for me and my contemporaries, a wake up call to be better. Extreme ownership of mistakes happens, but occurs, and I think that's great. I don't typically see that as I'm going to quit everything now because I failed.
yeah.
You spend a lot of money to train a very good United States military, and one of those things that we're trained in is growing from failure and growing from hardship and adversity. Um, Typically, and this again, just my experiences and my
Yeah.
beliefs, that 22 a day number is coming from things that happened to them that were
Mm,
beyond their control. And I think this is really where the vast majority of at least Americans are. People that do something super heinous and typically to that level typically don't have guilt and are just fine with their actions, right?
interesting.
Right.
True.
I think, and that's just how we, as a 21st century society, are. That's not a whether you're wearing a uniform or not. That's just people. I
True.
do believe, though, that a lot of people do that because one, they're trying to recapture some form of choice, and two, there's a feeling of helplessness that they cannot rise above. And helplessness doesn't always come from decisions. Helplessness comes from circumstance.
Mm,
Not saying that it's always bad luck that leads to that.
yeah.
In fact, of all 57 situations, I can think of three that, looking back, I can honestly say, yes, we could see where they were trending to. The other
Mm,
54, everything was fine. Their career was going well. Some challenges here and there, but nothing atypical of a very American 21st century experience, right?
wow.
Um, Hindsight being 2020 rarely rarely comes up in these things. I've never been able to say, oh yeah, he definitely he engaged the wrong person. He hurt a child. He
Mm,
absolutely did this out of guilt. I can never once
wow.
think of that, truthfully.
Wow.
In fact, I think, and when people make mistakes of that regards in the military, a lot of them default to, I need to live with this and
Mm,
learn from this, maybe suffer. Maybe there's definitely a lot of self-deprecation that comes with a military service, right? But
mhm.
I don't believe that 22 a day comes from extreme guilt of decisions. The baby killer mentality that we see in the military, I'm sure it's happened, but I don't know of a single situation that I've even heard from a third person or even from just the soldier rumor mill, just like any other social contract. I can't think of a single time. And every
Wow.
time that there has been a time where soldiers have been ethically compromised, the military's done a very good job of holding them accountable from my perspective.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, thank you for really taking time to explain that. It's so
Yeah.
important to slow down. Y'all, when we just slow down and
Mhm.
ask each other generous questions and offer each other our and I love the way you say it, and I really think it's instructive to all of us. Did you guys notice, like, Justin would go, "And this is my experience. I do not speak for the military, I do not speak even for other soldiers. I don't," right?
Mhm.
I think let's all get better at saying, "This is my experience.
Yeah.
This is my opinion,
Mhm.
and it may very well differ from someone else's,
Mhm.
and I wanna take great caring in owning that it's mine."
Yeah.
And I think all of us in any conversation can grow in that regard. I know I can, and get better at not painting with a broad brush, doing broad assumptions. I've done that plenty in my life, and I'm really seeking to change that in the way that I listen deeply and the way that I communicate. So thank you for modeling that in a really exquisite way. Okay, we were talking earlier about when I painted that picture at TEDx, and you were talking about your son Daniel, and can we just talk about grace and what that felt like, what that looks like? There's just a whole bunch we could uncover there as it relates to trauma and stuff.
On that note of extreme ownership, I think it's important that soldiers, veterans, if you're on here, I think you need to realize that there's trauma that we're causing other people as well without realizing it. Again, not our faults, but I feel that trauma sometimes radiates as we deal with things.
Wow.
No 15-year-old, and I'm going to get emotional dealing with this, Jen, so just bear with me. No 15-year-old should ever have to protect, in a quite literal way, their 38-year-old full-grown father. That's not a normal thing, right? That's not something that we should ask our children to do. But unfortunately, he's seen all the junk that comes with combat service, and he's had to deal with that. I would actually say that children of service members have less choice than anyone. Spouses can choose a lifestyle of their spouses and influence that. Children literally have no choice. Daniel Ryan Cauthen has been on the or along for the ride, choiceless for the past nearly 16 years. And to his credit, he's worked really hard to understand and respect it. He has asked Dad, can we watch some movies together if you're comfortable with it that you think would be good for this? Is there books that I can read and things like that? But no teenager should have to understand or work to understand the trauma that their parent is going through. And I think us as veterans need to get coaching or be in groups and things like that to help us off ramp that trauma in more healthy ways, and and also appreciate those people around us and acknowledge that I know I'm not a normal American right now. I want to be normal. I think we see a lot of people refusing to transition out of that culture. We see them with the hats and the motorcycle jackets, and they're always hanging around certain places. And I think the people that are around them, they're like, all right, already. Can we have a different cultural identity in this family and around you? And I think the modern soldier coming out of the military, U.S. Army at least, is really striving for that and is a lot more aware of the cost that families pay. On that note, though, for that day, I think one thing that happened is I kept apologizing, and I was incredibly mortified. And even when you put your hand on me and said it's okay, and other people said this is your body reacting to defense, my default was, who are you to condescend to me? And it's not because we think better of ourselves and even look down on people that are trying to comfort us. God forbid, that's not it at all. We don't respond well to grace. We don't respond well to patience, because in warfare, it's not about giving grace, and it's not about giving people the time they need to adapt, right? If anyone is ever trying to hire a soldier or a sailor, airman, marine, guardian, or Coast Guardsman, first of all, you've hit the jackpot when it comes to loyalty to the organization and work ethic and soft EQ skills and leadership. But we have a totally different love language. You want to talk about echo chambers? I think I was in the ultimate echo chamber. You would go to work with people who eat, sleep, and breathe green all day long. You would go to church with those same soldiers. Your preacher was a soldier. You go to the gas station. These are sons and daughters of soldiers. Everywhere you go, it is the military. And this is a culture that is not defined by race, creed, or gender. This is far deeper than that, frankly. This is an idealism that in some ways the military comes first. That's why the divorce rate's so high. The military
Yeah.
must come first. There's a loyalty there that can't be surpassed, and it's unfortunately for good reason, because that's the dedication it takes for that job. But
Yeah.
if you are an employer looking for these people, please give us grace when you give us grace, because we're still learning to be forgiving of ourselves. You're going to
Yeah.
see us beat ourselves up. You tell us the first time in a performance report that we are struggling, you will see a person that melts in a way that's
Oh.
very shocking to you, because we let the organization down. Not just you, we let everything down. That is the Atlas ball that we hold on our shoulders at all times. The weight of the world
Mm-hmm.
is literally on our shoulders. I would argue you want the military to do that because they take their job seriously, but that's ingrained over 2 decades, sometimes many times more, in your mindset.
Yeah.
If you're ever seeking a good volunteer opportunity and you don't know how to help the military, if you're in an executive position or a leadership position, you've been in the civilian world for any period of time, get on LinkedIn and adopt a soldier or adopt a
Oh,
veteran.
what an
Um,
awesome
yeah,
idea. I
yeah,
love that, Justin.
and say, I'm going to get you successful. I don't know what you want to do yet. I don't know what I don't know yet. And I've never really dealt with your culture, or your military culture, but I'm willing to learn. And I'm going to get you to what you consider to be a happy ending to your military service and a happy beginning to your next life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and know that I would say there's no better learner than the American warfighter, because we are professionally trained to be professionally trained. We have
Yeah.
to ingest loads of different types of information from a myriad of subjects and apply it in a very standardized way. No one's going to learn better than a prior service member.
Yeah.
But as you are being nice to us, be prepared to have to be even more nice to us, because we really struggle with that.
Yeah. It's so interesting you said that. I had a situation with my coach the other day, and it's so funny that she complimented me, and that's when I choke up and start to want to cry and get emotional, is when someone says a real kindness,
Yeah.
as opposed to, you would think it would be when someone criticizes you,
Mhm.
but it's just the opposite for me. So I actually get exactly what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
Not unique.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
now that I think about it, I think a lot of people maybe sometimes demonize the military because they tried to say thank you for your service to a soldier, or to a
Mhm.
sailor or an airman or Marine or whomever. And you
Mhm.
were probably met with a very awkward look or reaction sometimes.
Mhm.
It's not because we think down of you. It's because we think down on ourselves. We're not
Mm.
worthy of your thanks. Maybe we haven't gone to combat yet. Maybe we feel like we failed because of how maybe the conflict we served in ended. Maybe we are going through our own mental struggles, and we ask, it was it even worth it? So if you're willing to assume noble intent for us, I promise we're going to try to do better to assume noble intent. There's been a great counterculture, at least in the United States Army, of formally ensuring that soldiers actually say thank you for your support, even if they don't mean it initially, but to at least help us kind of acknowledge that we have a group of people behind us.
Mhm. No, yeah,
Yeah.
no, exactly. Ooh, we could talk for hours and
Yeah.
hours and hours and hours, Justin.
Mhm.
I appreciate you. You are a friend. You are just a gift to me, to my family. I
Yeah.
feel so fortunate to know you and your family.
Mhm.
And this conversation just means a great deal to me. So
Yeah.
thank you for taking time. We could have fleshed out 9,000 other things. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what's cool too. I love when I can get with people and there's just no end to the subjects we could cover and
Yeah.
the things we can discuss.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And your candor and your transparency. It's really wonderful, and I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, I've been fighting back tears for the past 60 minutes, only because I'm so honored that you picked me to represent such a large population
Mm,
on your platform.
yeah.
If I can have one quick request
Please.
of the audience, I would say it's not your responsibility or your duty to love the United States military, but I do think it should be the priority of every citizen to love your fellow American. And
Mm,
we are an important part of that American culture. And if we can all do things like Jin is doing, where we seek to be a student of humanity, I believe we fix it all. Like
mm,
we fix it all. Every problem that we have can be fixed, but it starts with a one-on-one conversation, and not just to check the box where I'm asking questions because I have to. An earnest yearning of understanding of why someone is the way they are, not to say, "Oh, I'm valid in my in my beliefs that they are bad," but understanding that we are all we all fall short of something, and we all do
mhm.
wrong by someone, but it is not because we are ill will.
Ugh, thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Y'all, I'm so glad you were here with us. I appreciate you. I appreciate that we are in community together and that we get into these conversations. And I will see you next time.